A young man named Yuji Matsutomo sits on a train, lost in thought. People often say that having a stable job is something to be grateful for, especially during difficult times. But Yuji wonders what there really is to be grateful for. Every day he is given more work than he can finish. The same people who set these impossible expectations criticize him for not meeting them. He is exhausted all the time, and even sleep does not bring him peace. When he first came to Tokyo, he had dreams and goals. Now those dreams have faded away, replaced by stress and sleepless nights. He wonders how much longer he can keep living like this. Outside, heavy rain pours down. At 2:16 in the morning, Yuji finally arrives at his apartment building. As he steps out of the elevator, the same depressing thoughts fill his mind. Then he notices a woman standing in the hallway with her back facing him. The sight surprises him. For a moment, he wonders if he is simply imagining things because of his exhaustion. But then he recognizes her. It is Mio Saotome, the woman who lives next door. She turns and greets him. Yuji realizes that she has also just returned from work. It is very late, but something about her situation seems strange. He feels it would be rude to ask too many questions, so after a brief greeting, he prepares to go inside. Before leaving, however, he notices her hesitation. It becomes clear that she is dealing with some kind of problem. Mio explains that she cannot get into her apartment because she left her key somewhere far away. Retrieving it would take hours. To make matters worse, she does not have her phone, wallet, or any way to contact someone for help. Yuji immediately understands the situation. Even if there were someone who could help her, it would be nearly impossible at this hour. The rain continues to fall, and Mio remains standing there, soaked and helpless. After thinking about it for a moment, Yuji decides to help. He offers to find her a temporary place to stay, but she refuses at first, saying she does not want to cause him trouble. Still, Yuji believes people should help each other when they can. He goes into his apartment and returns with a towel. "At least dry yourself while you wait," he says. As he hands it to her, he reflects on how he normally avoids getting involved in other people's problems, especially when money is involved. But this situation feels different. He can tell that Mio is still hiding something. When he asks her again, she gathers her thoughts and finally explains the real problem. She has an important meeting in the morning, and all the documents she needs are locked inside her apartment. Without them, her company could face serious trouble. Yuji immediately realizes how serious the situation is. There seems to be only one solution left. Getting her key from the distant location would take too long. So he asks about her balcony and whether anything blocks access to it. Mio thinks for a moment and says there probably is not, although she is not completely sure. Yuji decides to climb from his balcony to hers. If necessary, he will break a window and enter the apartment. The plan is risky, but he accepts that. Since they are both involved in the outcome, he invites Mio into his apartment first. She worries about the danger, but Yuji explains how he plans to carefully cross over despite the rain. When Mio offers to take the risk herself, Yuji immediately refuses. As he gets ready, Mio nervously mentions that her apartment is not very tidy. Yuji steps onto his balcony and explains what he will do once he gets inside. Mio nods and reminds him not to push himself too hard. Moving carefully through the rain, Yuji manages to reach her balcony. Mio quickly checks if he is all right, and he reassures her that he is fine. He tells her to wait by the entrance while he deals with the window. Remembering a method he once learned, he follows the steps carefully. He wets the glass, places tape over it, and prepares his hands before striking it. The job is much harder than he expected. The impact hurts his hand, but he keeps going. Eventually, the glass finally breaks. Yuji carefully enters the apartment and unlocks the door from the inside. As he looks around, he notices that the room is filled with boxes. The apartment is simple and organized, though not quite what he expected. Outside, Mio waits anxiously. She asks if he made it inside, and Yuji tells her that he did. He opens the door and Mio quickly steps in. She seems worried about what he might have seen, but Yuji does not pay much attention to her lifestyle. Instead, he focuses on securing the broken window as best he can. Afterward, he advises her to clean up and warm herself before she gets sick, especially after everything she went through to recover the documents. Mio steps into her apartment and quietly says, "I'm home." Yuji smiles and replies, "Welcome home." The words catch her completely off guard. It has been a very long time since anyone welcomed her home like that. Still surprised, she repeats, "I'm home." Once again, Yuji gently answers, "Welcome home." The simple exchange leaves a deep impression on her. Mio realizes how long it has been since she experienced such a warm moment. Yuji explains that when people live alone, small interactions like these often disappear from everyday life. Mio says she would like to hear those words again someday. Yuji agrees, but points out that it is already very late and suggests continuing the conversation another time. Then Mio asks if they can do it again the next day. Yuji tells her the usual time he returns home from work. After thinking for a moment, Mio makes an unexpected proposal. She offers to hire him for the role of welcoming her home and says she is willing to pay him. Yuji asks whether she truly understands what that arrangement means. Mio calmly replies that she does. She then explains her financial situation, including how much money she earns. As Yuji listens, he thinks about the difference between a person's salary and the amount they actually take home after deduction. Mio continues talking about her life. She has no close friends and no real hobbies. Her daily routine is simple, and even though she earns a good income, she rarely spends money. She stays healthy and works hard, but she has no one with whom she can share her achievements. Yuji points out that meaningful relationships do not appear on their own. Mio agrees and admits that she is not good at building connections with people. She explains how much their small interaction affected her. After experiencing it, she feels like she cannot return to her old routine. Then she offers him a monthly payment if he agrees to continue welcoming her home. Yuji is shocked by the amount she proposes. He questions the entire situation and assumes that her exhaustion is affecting her judgment. He reminds her that he already has a job. In response, Mio asks about his workplace. Yuji hands her his business card. After looking at it, she gives a small nod, showing that she understands something. Confused, Yuji asks what she means, but Mio avoids giving a direct answer. Instead, she gently guides him toward the door and thanks him for helping her so late at night. Yuji tells her not to worry and promises that he will take care of the broken window. Mio looks slightly surprised before saying goodbye. The encounter comes to a quiet end. Even after returning to his apartment, Yuji cannot stop worrying. He feels uneasy and wonders whether he will wake up on time the next morning. When he finally checks the clock, panic sets in. He has already missed the start of his workday. His phone battery is almost dead, and the screen is filled with missed calls from work, especially from his section manager. Realizing something is wrong, he quickly calls back and says he will arrive as soon as possible. His superior immediately cuts him off. There is no need to come in. Yuji learns that the company no longer considers him an employee. If he shows up, it will only create problems. The call ends without further explanation. Yuji sits there in shock. Frustration begins to build inside him. Even after all this time, people still mispronounce his name despite his constant corrections. Alone in his apartment, he struggles to understand how his life fell apart so suddenly. He wonders if the strange events of the previous night meant anything at all. Before he can gather his thoughts, someone knocks on the door. When he opens it, he finds Mio standing there. She looks calm, confident, and completely different from the exhausted woman he met the night before. Immediately, Yuji becomes suspicious. He wonders whether she had something to do with what happened. Mio calmly confirms that he no longer needs to worry about his previous job. Her professional attitude makes everything clearer. Yuji begins to realize that she was completely serious about her proposal. She states that she intends to hire him and explains the terms. She discusses the monthly salary and even presents formal arrangements prepared through her company. The situation is changing so quickly that Yuji can barely keep up. Before he can properly respond, Mio takes his hand and leads him forward as if the decision has already been made. She brings him into her apartment, signaling the start of his new role. Yuji follows, still confused, while Mio acts as though everything has already been settled. As she enters her apartment, she quietly says, "I'm home." Yuji immediately replies, "Welcome home." He is simply doing the job he has been hired for. In only a few hours, his life has completely changed. His new employer is Mio Saotome. His job is simple. Whenever she returns home, he welcomes her back. As long as he follows the agreement, he will receive the promised salary. With his workplace located right next door, the arrangement is both convenient and incredibly unusual. Even so, one problem remains. People still keep getting his name wrong, and the annoyance never completely goes away. Despite everything, Yuji realizes that this strange situation marks the beginning of a new chapter in his life. A week passes. Mio Satome is 28 years old and works in marketing. She is employed at a small company that often partners with much larger firms on important projects. Her talent and skill are obvious to everyone around her. During a business call, she confidently discusses work matters. She assigns responsibility to a trusted colleague while highlighting his previous accomplishments. The way she speaks naturally earns the respect of others. Later, Yuji brings her a cup of tea. Mio notices that it has already cooled down. Expecting this reaction, Yuji immediately hands her a fresh cup. She accepts it and quietly drinks. As he watches her, he reflects on the way she carries herself. She wears very little makeup, yet she always appears composed and guarded, almost like a warrior preparing for battle. After finishing her tea, she leaves to organize her work. Yuji watches her go. As he stands there, he remembers the rare expression she showed whenever he welcomed her home. Then he turns his attention to the apartment. The first thing he learned about Mio is her unusual sense of cleanliness. She carefully separates food waste and disposable containers. However, sealed bottles and unopened items are often left scattered around the room because she believes they cannot become dirty or cause problems. A few days earlier, she had explained her reasoning. She pointed out that plastic bottles are durable and resistant to damage or contamination. Yuji listened carefully before reminding her that the apartment was also his workplace. Keeping the space organized was part of his responsibilities. The second thing he noticed was her unfamiliarity with certain expressions and social meanings. Sometimes she simply does not understand them. Instead of worrying about it, she focuses on simple tasks, such as breaking down cardboard boxes. As the day passes, it eventually becomes time for her to return home. When Mio arrives, Yuji greets her warmly. At first, she looks surprised. Then she remembers that this is part of his job. Slowly, her expression softens. Relief and quiet happiness appear on her face. The third thing Yuji notices is that Mio struggles with communication outside of work. She becomes lonely very easily. Her understanding of personal relationships is vague, and she does not fully understand how people allow others into their personal space so naturally. Sometimes, especially after a long and exhausting day, she even behaves a little childishly. As they sit down to eat together, Yuji quietly reflects on everything he has learned about her so far. For dinner, he prepares several dishes, including ginger pork and multiple soybean-based side dishes. The work that once felt exhausting now gives him a sense of purpose. When Mio sees the meal, her eyes light up with excitement. She quickly heads off to change her clothes. Before leaving, she briefly asks Yuji for help, but he refuses and continues focusing on the food. As he works in the kitchen, he thinks about her behavior. He suspects that her reactions come from spending so much time without anyone taking care of her in this way. Even so, he reminds himself to stay professional. He worries that if he becomes careless, he could end up disrupting the unusual balance they have created together. While standing in the kitchen, Yuji calls out to Mio, telling her to come eat before the food gets cold, but she does not respond. Holding a bowl and a serving spoon, he looks around the room and tries to stay calm. His eyes move across the kitchen and eventually toward the refrigerator, where he remembers seeing insect spray earlier that day. He reminds himself that he had already expected some problems because of the condition of the apartment. Then something suddenly catches his attention. His body stiffens. There is an insect in the kitchen. Yuji freezes for a moment, feeling both annoyed and uncomfortable. Although he does not like depending on Mio, he wonders if her unusual attitude toward cleanliness means she would not be bothered by it. Without thinking, he calls her name. At the same time, his thoughts begin racing. When he notices her reaction, he quickly corrects himself and forces his expression back to normal. He realizes he cannot ignore the problem. The small space makes it feel as though there is nowhere to escape, and the tension grows as the insect moves unpredictably around the room. Mio does not react at first, leaving Yuji to deal with both the insect and her lack of concern. Still, giving up is not an option. As both her neighbor and someone responsible for maintaining the apartment, he gathers his courage and prepares to act. The insect darts around the room, making the task even harder. After a chaotic struggle, Yuji finally manages to get rid of it using the insect spray. At last, the room becomes quiet again. The crisis is over. Mio calms down, gets properly dressed, and the kitchen gradually returns to normal. After the incident, Mio suddenly begins to cry. Yuji tries to comfort her. He offers her a small dessert and encourages her to relax. Her eyes immediately light up. She happily admits that she loves sweets. However, she quickly regains control of herself and decides to eat her proper meal first. Watching her, Yuji concludes that emotional stress is probably the reason she sometimes behaves in a more childlike way. Accepting this, he gently helps her focus on the present. For now, he decides that cleaning can wait. The meal is more important. He turns his attention back to the food while it is still warm. Mio agrees and takes a seat. Yuji works efficiently, arranging the table and finishing the final steps of cooking. He prepares the meat so it can be served immediately. Using a prepared sauce as the base, he adds extra ingredients and carefully turns the meat to cook it evenly. After adding the final touches, he transfers everything to serving dishes. Meanwhile, Mio waits impatiently at the table, urging him to hurry. Without stopping, Yuji brings all the dishes together and finishes setting the table. Once everything is ready, they sit down to eat. Together, they express their thanks for the meal before beginning. As they eat, Yuji remembers where he learned the recipe. A senior co-worker from one of his old part-time jobs taught it to him. He thinks about the balance of flavors and preparation. Everyone has different tastes, but he feels satisfied with how the dish turned out. It has been a long time since he last made it, Mio takes her first bite and immediately looks delighted. She eats enthusiastically while Yuji watches from across the table. He wonders if the flavor suits her, but her reaction quickly gives him the answer. She loves it. Mio continues eating quickly and shows very little restraint. Yuji reminds her to slow down and chew properly instead of rushing. Again and again, she tells him how delicious the food is. As they continue eating, Yuji reflects on how pleasant it feels to share a meal with someone. Ever since the first day, this routine has brought him a sense of comfort. Mio agrees in her own way while happily enjoying her food. Moments like this remind Yuji why cooking is worth the effort. After dinner, Mio suggests spending more time together by playing a card game. Yuji agrees, although he admits it has been a long time since he last played one. He also wonders why she owns a game that normally requires multiple players. Mio explains the rules and points out several details about how it should be played. Then she casually changes some of the rules to better fit the two of them. As time passes, Mio comments that staying up too late is unhealthy, and that they should get some rest after taking care of their evening routines. She also mentions that the day ran longer than usual because of earlier work-related events. During their conversation, Yuji reacts casually to something she says. Mio notices and immediately turns it into a playful moment, claiming that she has gained an advantage. Afterward, Yuji tells her to go freshen up so they can finally end the day. Suddenly, Mio suggests that they share a bath. Yuji refuses instantly. He knows he would never be able to stay calm in that situation, so he firmly keeps his distance. Instead, he suggests cleaning the apartment after bathing. He also points out her earlier behavior in a practical way, explaining that such dramatic reactions are unnecessary. With that, the long evening finally comes to an end. The first week of Yuji's new job is over. The next day is Saturday. Yuji wakes up later than usual and realizes how long it has been since he last enjoyed proper rest. He checks the time and sees that he still has plenty of morning left. He prepares breakfast and enjoys it peacefully. The toast is perfectly cooked and the coffee tastes fresh. It is a satisfying start to the day. After eating, he sits on the sofa and relaxes. As he enjoys his day off, he finds himself thinking about Mio. He knows she gets lonely easily. At the same time, he realizes that having someone she barely knows spending time in her apartment every day could also be stressful for her. Because of that, he assumes she might want some time alone. Just then, a voice calls out from outside. Yuji immediately realizes that his day is not going to be quiet after all. He steps outside and finds Mio standing there. Surprised to see her so early, he asks why she came. Mio apologizes for bothering him on his day off and begins explaining herself. She brings up the events of the previous night and describes them as somewhat embarrassing and disorderly. Yuji immediately thinks he understands. He assumes she feels embarrassed about how she acted. He reflects on how people who work closely together sometimes reveal sides of themselves that they would rather keep hidden. Usually those moments are left unspoken. Mio continues talking. However, Yuji interrupts too quickly. Without realizing it, he completely misunderstands what she is trying to say. Mio quickly clarifies that she was talking about the card game from the previous night. She admits that her earlier comment was not completely serious. Hearing that, Yuji relaxes. He suggests that they can always play again another time. After all, games like that can easily last for hours. Mio agrees and tells him she expects him to keep his promise. As Yuji looks at her, he notices how calm she seems. There is also a quiet sense of comfort in her expression. Curious, he asks about the real reason she came to see him. Mio takes out her wallet and offers him money. She says she wants him to come with her to buy a stuffed toy. Yuji understands what she is asking, but he cannot understand why she is offering payment. He thinks about it for a moment. Plenty of adults have simple hobbies, and asking someone to come along is not strange. However, paying someone for it feels unnecessary. He wonders if the money is meant to make up for taking up his day off. Mio confirms that it is. Yuji gently tells her that something like this does not require payment. Mio insists. Yuji refuses. Before long, it becomes obvious that they see the situation very differently. Taking a moment to understand her point of view, Yuji explains his own. He tells her that spending time together like this actually sounds enjoyable. Mio hesitates. She worries that he might eventually find her boring. Even so, she asks him to stay with her until she finishes shopping. Yuji agrees immediately. Mio admits that she is worried about being a burden. Listening to her, Yuji realizes something. Without their current arrangement, Mio probably never would have expected anyone to stay by her side like this. Little by little, they reach an understanding. What should have been a simple outing turns into a detailed discussion, almost like negotiating a contract. In the end, they settle on how to handle the day together. Mio thanks Yuji as they spend time together. At the same time, she feels relieved that he agreed to come, even though it is his day off. The thought of being surrounded by couples and groups by herself makes her uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Yuji struggles with the idea of treating the outing as work. As they walk, a stuffed toy catches Mio's attention. Simply looking at it seems to comfort her. Even so, she believes choosing the right one is not easy. Yuji then remembers the many unopened boxes in her apartment. He starts to suspect that she orders quite a lot of things online. Soon they arrive at a shop in Tokyo that specializes in plush toys. The store looks normal enough, but Yuji never imagined he would end up in a place like this. Mio seems determined to show him a world he has never experienced before. As he looks around, he feels completely overwhelmed. Cute plush toys fill every corner of the store. The sheer number of them only increases his confusion. While browsing, Mio explains why she prefers buying plush toys in person. When shopping online, she says, it is impossible to properly judge their texture and softness through a screen. Curious, Yuji asks what she normally orders online instead. To his surprise, Mio answers without hesitation. Water. Yuji blinks in confusion. For a moment, he thinks she means something unusual. Instead, she explains that she buys bottled drinking water produced in Tokyo. The product is sold commercially and has become surprisingly popular. Yuji finds this strange. He asks whether people really buy it since it does not seem very different from regular tap water. Her explanation reminds him of his hometown, Fukuoka, where treated seawater was once sold as drinking water. Because of that, the idea feels oddly familiar. Mio looks slightly annoyed. She says she has heard those comments many times before and insists that the water is practical. She drinks it during meetings with clients and occasionally gives bottles away as small gifts. To Yuji, it still feels strange. For someone so skilled at communicating with people, Mio often has surprisingly unusual habits. Wanting to understand better, he asks what makes the water special. Mio immediately begins explaining. Tokyo's water purification system is highly advanced, she says. However, tap water still contains chlorine because of legal safety requirements. She speaks so quickly that Yuji struggles to keep up. He asks whether the bottled version also contains chlorine. Since chlorine is used for disinfection, the question seems reasonable. Mio confirms that it does. She then continues explaining that the water also goes through ozone treatment. This process removes impurities, such as mold and other unwanted substances. It also improves the taste and removes unpleasant odors, creating cleaner and fresher water. As Yuji listens, he begins to think that it might actually taste better than normal tap water. Suddenly, Mio's attention shifts. A stuffed toy has caught her eye. She picks it up and carefully examines it. Yuji watches quietly, trying to understand why it appeals to her so much. Mio studies every detail. She checks the texture, design, and overall craftsmanship. To her, everything about it seems perfect. Yuji notices that it resembles a real dog. It is designed to look like a small cavalier puppy and appears surprisingly realistic. Mio compares its size to something she has in mind and seems satisfied. Yuji assumes she plans to buy it. However, she indicates that she has already looked at many other options. Without spending too much time on it, she moves on. The two continue through the store. As they walk, Mio suggests visiting another shop. Before Yuji can say anything, she asks whether he wants to keep shopping. He smiles. Then he tells her he will stay with her until the very end. Officially, he claims he is doing it because it is part of his job. Deep down, however, he knows that is not entirely true. He's actually enjoying himself. Mio would probably never believe that, so he keeps it to himself. Satisfied with his decision, he follows her. Mio continues moving forward with her usual efficiency. While walking, Yuji offers to carry the plush toy for her. She immediately refuses. Pointing out that he is already carrying several bags, she tells him not to worry. Yuji accepts her answer. Seeing how much fun she is having makes him happy. At the same time, he becomes curious about the things she likes most. Mio points to an octopus plush toy and begins talking about its texture. Only a few moments later, she is already heading toward another store. Eventually, they arrive at a game center. Yuji feels slightly tired and takes a moment to look around. He wonders if the arcade has always been this close. Mio asks whether he recognizes the place. A tense expression appears on Yuji's face. Slowly, a memory comes back to him. He has been here before. The memory becomes clearer. Back when he was still working at his previous company, he visited this arcade with a junior coworker and another colleague. The junior employee had been hesitant because of work responsibilities. However, the other coworker insisted that they take a short break. During that visit, Yuji won a plush toy from one of the machines. Later, he and his coworker even challenged each other to a strength testing game. The memories linger in his mind as he stands in front of the arcade once again. Mio comments that it is nice that Yuji became closer to his coworkers. To her, it feels like one of those unexpected things that happened by chance. Her words make Yuji think back to another strange moment from his old job. He remembers a time when the company president suddenly appeared near a photo booth with someone he did not recognize. At the same moment, Mio happened to be looking in his direction. For several awkward seconds, they simply stared at each other. Then, without saying a word, both of them acted as if nothing had happened. Thinking about it now, Yuji reflects on how casually adults deal with awkward situations. Mio then asks about the stuffed animal he once won for his junior coworker. As he thinks about it, he realizes that prizes like that cannot usually be bought in normal stores. Mio listens with mild curiosity while keeping most of her attention on the arcade around them. The two walk toward the crane game area. Yuji explains that the prize they are looking for is probably on the first floor and may have been sitting there for over a month. He's not even sure if it is still available. When they arrive, they find a strange prize on display. It looks like a saber-toothed tiger trapped inside a block of ice. The toy appears to be an original design and is not connected to any famous series. For a moment, Yuji wonders whether it is supposed to be a tiger or just a large cat. He even briefly thinks about possible copyright issues. Mio studies the plush toy and points out that it already looks worn out. Yuji explains that crane game prizes are often placed in difficult positions on purpose. The harder they are to win, the more money people spend trying. Although he understands the business strategy behind it, he does not particularly like it. He suggests looking for a better prize elsewhere. Looking at the stuffed toy again, he feels it is poorly made and probably not something Mio would normally want. To his surprise, Mio gently nudges him. "The plushie is a good child," she says. Yuji blinks. "Are you sure about that one?" he asks. Mio simply nods. "I'll take it home and take care of it." Yuji points out that the toy will never actually grow up. Ignoring his comment, Mio stands in front of the crane machine and prepares herself seriously. To her, this is an important mission. Yuji jokingly tells her that if she wants the prize, she should win it on the first try. 20 minutes later, neither of them is laughing. The game is much harder than expected. Every attempt ends in failure. The prize barely moves, and each missed chance becomes more frustrating than the last. Mio repeatedly taps the machine in frustration. After every attempt, she apologizes to the stuffed toy, as though it can hear her. Yuji watches her determination with a mixture of amusement and sympathy. He explains that many crane games are designed this way. Often, players must spend a certain amount of money before they have a realistic chance of winning. Even then, the prize can shift awkwardly at the last second and ruin everything. Mio starts wondering how much money she should spend before giving up. Yuji points out that the stuffed toy is already worn out and will probably be replaced soon. In his opinion, she has already spent enough. Even so, Mio keeps trying. She is clearly not skilled at crane games, but she refuses to quit. When Yuji comments on the situation, Mio suddenly asks if he understands the concept of sugarcoating. In response, he tells her to watch carefully. Although she worries about spending more money, Yuji reassures her that it is not a big deal. Deep down, he reflects on something. Fate is not something people simply stumble upon. Sometimes it is something that must be earned. With that thought in mind, he prepares to prove it. Later, after they finally leave the arcade, Mio thanks him for spending part of his holiday with her. She reminds him that technically it was still work. Her comment brings him back to reality. For a brief moment, he thinks about everything they did that day. They ate pasta at a cafe, they visited a starfish exhibit. They spent time shopping together. Even so, he quickly reminds himself that it was not a date. Mio proudly shows him the stuffed toy she managed to win. Then she thanks him again. As Yuji watches her, he notices something. She looks more tired than she is trying to appear. He tells her to take good care of the stuffed toy and the cats waiting at home. Mio promises that she will. She thanks him once more and mentions that she should brush her teeth after eating sweets. The two part ways. Yuji returns to his apartment and starts thinking about dinner. Instant ramen sounds like the easiest option. While checking his finances, he notices something alarming. He spent 17,000 yen that day. Normally that would bother him. Surprisingly, he feels no regret. The money was spent while helping Mio enjoy herself. Because of that, he cannot bring himself to be upset. He reminds himself that holding on to stress only causes more problems. As he reflects on the day, his thoughts return to Mio. Her childish behavior is not simply immaturity. He realizes it is a reaction to emotional and psychological stress. The arcade, the games, and the aquarium may have helped her relax, but the real cause goes much deeper than that. Later, Yuji arrives at Mio's apartment and calls out to her. There is no answer. Then he notices something. She left him the key. Assuming she is taking a shower, he quietly lets himself in and waits. However, when he looks inside the room, he freezes. Mio is sitting on the floor. She is surrounded by stuffed animals. Tears run down her face as she quietly talks to them. Listening to her, Yuji begins to understand what is happening. Mio is replaying the events of the day in her mind. She feels embarrassed about how she acted at the arcade. She feels embarrassed about spilling pasta sauce earlier. Most of all, she worries that Yuji might not want to go out with her again. Standing quietly behind her, Yuji reflects on the situation. He thinks about regret. Why do people feel it so strongly? Even when life is treated professionally and logically, regret always finds a way to appear. He realizes that these emotions are simply part of being human. No one can completely escape them. Not even fate itself could fully understand every feeling hidden inside a person's heart. Yuji slowly steps into the room. As he thinks about the day, another idea comes to mind. People grow closer when they allow others to see their true selves. Maybe that is how real connections are formed. He wonders what fate really means. Then, quietly, he decides that perhaps fate is created when people choose to open up to one another. At that moment, Mio notices him. Startled, she quickly asks why he is there. As far as she knows, his work for the day already ended. Yuji understands that there is little he can do to directly erase her worries. Instead of trying to solve everything, he focuses on something simple. Walking closer, he makes a suggestion. Want to play Uno? Mio looks at him for a moment. Then she quietly agrees. Yuji and Mio spend the next several hours together. They make ramen, adding eggs to it, and the warm meal helps improve Mio's mood. Afterward, they play Uno for hours. Using the overlapping draw two rule keeps the game exciting, and before long, the two lose track of time. The scene shifts. Mio quietly murmurs that she is home while the sound of something being stirred fills the room. Nearby, Yuji calmly holds out a small bowl of natto and gently tells her to mix it into the broth. As he works, fragments of recent memories pass through his mind. Earlier that day, light rain had fallen. By evening, it had become a steady drizzle. When Mio finally returned home, she looked exhausted. Sweat covered her face, and she seemed to be struggling just to stay composed. Concerned, Yuji suggested that she take a shower and freshen up. Then he noticed something unusual. She had walked into the apartment without taking off her shoes. As she took another step, her body suddenly swayed. Yuji reacted immediately and caught her before she could fall. The unexpected strength in his arms surprised her. For a moment, she stared at him in shock, but when he looked closer, he realized the real problem. Mio had a high fever. Even though she insisted that she was fine, Yuji began to doubt that she fully understood how sick she was. He wondered if she was the type of person who ignored exhaustion and pain until her body finally reached its limit. With that in mind, he decided to take care of her himself. Lifting her carefully, he carried her to the bedroom and gently laid her on the bed. Memories from his childhood surfaced in his mind, reminding him how serious a fever could become if ignored. Any complaints could wait. She had been caught in the rain, and her health came first. Soft, unclear murmurs escaped her lips as the fever worsened. It became obvious that she might not even realize how sick she was. Yuji carefully removed her makeup and wiped away the sweat on her skin to help keep her condition from getting worse. As he helped her change into clean clothes, her fragile condition became impossible to ignore. The sight made him realize just how vulnerable she was at the moment. A sense of responsibility settled over him. As he hung up her wet clothes to dry, he reflected on how even small acts of care could matter greatly when someone was depending on him. Mio was clearly struggling. Yuji noticed every sign of it. Even so, he resolved to care for her properly, without letting personal feelings cloud his judgment. When he asked whether she was hungry, she shook her head. Still, he knew she needed to eat something, so he decided to make porridge. At the very least, she needed enough food to help her recover. In the kitchen, Yuji gathered the ingredients: rice, eggs, green onions. He carefully prepared everything and began cooking. As the rice simmered, he stirred the ingredients together and covered the pot to let it steam. He also prepared a heat-resistant container filled with ice and unseasoned dashi. Slowly, the egg porridge came together. He added dried sardines for extra flavor and finished it with a sprinkle of chopped green onions. Once it was ready, he carried it to Mio's room. Standing outside the door, he knocked. When no answer came immediately, he wondered if she had already fallen asleep. Carefully, he opened the door and stepped inside. The room was scattered with various items. Mio looked up and greeted him warmly. Curious, Yuji asked what she was doing. Mio explained that she was looking for something and would continue searching later. Then she introduced him to a friend named A-chan, a pure white fox plush toy. Moments later, she mentioned another toy named Fu-chan. Then she quickly insisted that it was not actually Fu-chan. Tears began forming in her eyes as she talked. Yuji gently warned her not to push herself too hard. Setting the porridge down in front of her, he encouraged her to eat while he looked for A-chan. Mio immediately asked where A-chan had gone. Yuji reassured her. If I find A-chan, I'll let you know. As he fed her, a worrying thought crossed his mind. Her fever might be affecting her memory. He carefully watched how much she ate, but avoided forcing her. Afterward, he gave her medicine. Suddenly, Mio coughed. Yuji immediately checked on her. He worried that the powdered medicine might be difficult for her to swallow. Mio looked uncertain. Gently, he encouraged her to try again for the sake of her recovery. A little later, Yuji prepared to step out for a moment. Before leaving, he asked if she needed anything. Mio protested weakly. To reassure her, Yuji gently held her hand. He wanted her to know she would not be left alone, even for a short time. Just then, his phone rang. The sudden sound broke the silence. When he answered, a familiar voice greeted him. It was Tsuchiya. Tsuchiya warmly remarked that it had been a long time. He explained that his smartphone had been damaged recently, but had finally been repaired. Wanting to celebrate, he asked what Yuji had been up to lately. Yuji briefly explained his current situation. In simple terms, he said that he was helping someone and was busy at the moment. Tsuchiya asked whether his workload had changed since leaving his previous company. He also mentioned that he was heading home and suggested meeting for drinks sometime. Instead, Yuji asked him for a favor. Without explaining the details, he requested that several items be delivered to his apartment. Tsuchiya accepted surprisingly easily. The conversation continued naturally from there. As they talked, Yuji reflected on how ordinary conversations usually flowed. At the same time, he imagined how difficult it would be to explain his current job to someone else. No matter how he thought about it, the situation sounded unbelievable. In the end, he decided not to explain it. Even though the circumstances were unusual, he could not simply ignore them. For now, Mio needed his help, and that was enough reason for him to stay. Mio calls out to Yuji and asks who he is talking to. Not wanting to delay her medicine any longer, Yuji gives a quick explanation. He apologizes and admits that the situation is difficult to explain clearly. On the other end of the call, Tsuchiya listens and comments on the voice he heard in the background. He assumes it belongs to a woman from work who is asking for attention. Given Yuji's unusual circumstances, Tsuchiya even starts making guesses about his new job. Before ending the call, Yuji asks him for a favor. He requests some sake and a grape-flavored drinkable medicine that might help Mio recover and stay warm. Tsuchiya agrees without hesitation. After hanging up, Yuji takes a moment to reflect. The conversation went surprisingly smoothly. By speaking quickly, he managed to avoid a long list of questions. Satisfied, he turns his attention back to Mio and continues preparing for Tsuchiya's arrival. A short while later, the doorbell rings. When Yuji opens the door, he finds Tsuchiya standing there. As promised, he has brought everything that was requested. There are grape-flavored items, medicine, and several bottles of sake, including a famous brand from Yamaguchi. Yuji thanks him and feels relieved that he arrived so quickly. Naturally, Tsuchiya immediately demands an explanation. Wanting answers, he insists on hearing the whole story. Yuji begins explaining the situation. Before he can get very far, Mio suddenly appears. She looks at Tsuchiya and asks if he is Yuji's friend. Caught off guard, Yuji pauses. Meanwhile, Tsuchiya smiles and introduces himself. After hearing the explanation, he learns that Mio is Yuji's neighbor and employer. She hired him for household-related work and pays him enough to support himself. As Yuji explains everything honestly, he realizes that hiding the truth from Tsuchiya would have felt wrong. After all, Tsuchiya rushed over to help without asking for anything in return. On a rare evening, when he could have gone straight home before 9 o'clock, he instead came to help a friend. Thinking about that makes Yuji appreciate him even more. As the conversation continues, Tsuchiya admits that he still does not fully understand the arrangement. Mio calmly explains her situation. Because her life revolves almost entirely around work, she often feels lonely. Over time, she has come to depend on Yuji's presence and support. Since this is her first time meeting Tsuchiya, she speaks politely and maintains a professional attitude. Tsuchiya soon notices that she looks unwell. Mio admits that she neglected her health and apologizes for being in such a condition. She also thanks him for bringing the medicine. His casual response makes her feel slightly embarrassed. Excusing herself politely, she returns to her room. She quietly resolves to repay the kindness she has received. After she leaves, the conversation shifts to other topics. Yuji and Tsuchiya complain about their former boss and the difficult days they spent at their previous company. At one point, Tsuchiya proudly mentions how successful his hair transplant was. Despite the joking conversation, he eventually returns to the more important subject. He reminds Yuji to take proper care of Mio. Although uncertain about many things, Yuji agrees. Before leaving, Tsuchiya adds one final observation. Given how grateful Mio seems, he suspects she will eventually try to repay Yuji somehow. Maybe with a meal, maybe with a gift, or perhaps in some other thoughtful way. With that, he prepares to leave. Watching him go, Yuji reflects on something. Without exaggeration, he considers Tsuchiya a genuinely kind person. Even with his Kyushu accent, his flirtatious personality, and the exhausting hours spent riding late trains after long workdays, Yuji feels fortunate to know him. Just as Tsuchiya reaches the elevator, he suddenly stops. Yuji asks what is wrong. Tsuchiya turns around with a serious expression. He points at the sake he brought earlier. "That sake is for Mio," he says firmly. "No one else is allowed to drink it." Then his expression grows even more intense. He declares that he still has not forgiven Yuji for hiding his strange work arrangement. With that final complaint, he steps into the elevator and leaves. Watching the doors close, Yuji immediately takes back every compliment he had just given him in his mind. Afterward, he goes to check on Mio. He asks how she is feeling. Mio admits that she feels a little better. Hearing that, Yuji relaxes. As long as her condition has not worsened, it means she is recovering. That alone is enough to reassure him. Mio then mentions that she probably will not see Tsuchiya again for a while. Curious, Yuji asks why. Mio quickly clarifies. Actually, she plans to see him again the next day. She simply hopes that he is not angry with her. Even if she somehow upset him, she wants to believe he will still visit. Yuji reassures her immediately. Tsuchiya does not hate her. If being around her truly bothered him, he would never have gone out of his way to help. His actions prove that he cares. Mio quietly reflects on that. She admits that she would not want unpleasant people around her, even if she were surrounded by others. Yuji thinks for a moment and encourages her not to worry. Everything will be fine. Feeling relieved, Mio decides that she will properly thank Tsuchiya once she is recovered. With that settled, Yuji returns his attention to her meal. The porridge is still sitting nearby. Mio eats slowly. Yuji reminds her not to force herself. If she pushes too hard while sick, her body will only suffer more. After eating a small amount, Mio thanks him. She admits that earlier she could barely taste anything because of her fever. Yuji promises to make the porridge again once she is fully recovered. This time they can enjoy it properly as a late-night snack. Mio smiles. She comments that porridge tastes best when cooked in a clay pot. The two agree to share it together in the future. It becomes a small promise between them. Later, Yuji opens the refrigerator and checks what ingredients are available. Since Mio's fever has improved slightly, he decides to prepare something simple that pairs well with the porridge. After thinking for a moment, he chooses a traditional comfort drink, sake eggnog. Gathering the ingredients, he begins cooking. Using leftover soy milk, he measures sugar and honey. He heats half a cup of sake in the microwave to reduce its alcohol content. Then he carefully beats the eggs until smooth and strains them through a tea strainer to remove any lumps. Slowly, he combines everything together. He adds the warm sake little by little. Next comes a small amount of hot water. Finally, he finishes the mixture with soy milk. Once the drink is ready, he brings it to Mio. She takes a sip. Immediately, surprise appears on her face. Then comes delight. Yuji explains that sake eggnog is actually very easy to make at home with a microwave. Mio thanks him and says she would like to enjoy it together again once she is healthy. After that, Yuji gives her medicine. Using a convenient dispenser, he makes it easier for her to take. He watches carefully to make sure she swallows everything properly. The grape flavor seems to make the process slightly more pleasant. Once she finishes, he clears away the dishes. Then he stays nearby and keeps watch over her. As she gradually becomes sleepy, he wonders whether she is still worried about work waiting for her tomorrow. Eventually, Mio falls asleep. Later, Yuji settles down in the living room. As he watches her sleeping peacefully, he notices something. Despite having a high fever the night before, Mio somehow found the energy to place a blanket over him. The realization leaves him quietly touched. His eyes drift around the apartment. The evidence of the day is everywhere. Ingredients scattered around the kitchen, empty natto containers, discarded pajamas, slippers left out of place, even a skirt lying nearby. Looking at the scene, Yuji slowly pieces together everything that happened throughout the night. One by one, the events replay in his mind as he reflects on the strange but meaningful life he now shares with Mio. Morning arrives, and Mio wakes up feeling much better. For the first time since getting sick, she feels like she can move around normally again. As she gets out of bed, she notices that Yuji spent the entire night looking after her. The thought stays in her mind as she heads toward the kitchen. Before going to work, she wants something to eat. Remembering the drink Yuji made for her the night before, she decides to try making the sake eggnog herself. However, she quickly discovers that it is not as easy as it looked. She mixes sake, egg, and sugar together, expecting a similar result. Instead, the drink turns out far too strong. Unlike Yuji's carefully prepared version, hers contains much more alcohol. Looking at the bottle, she realizes why. The Yamaguchi sake has a high alcohol content. Drinking the entire mixture first thing in the morning would probably leave her intoxicated. Accepting defeat, she gives up on recreating it perfectly. Instead, she focuses on getting ready for work. After changing clothes and preparing her things, she leaves for the office. Once she arrives, she begins reviewing her tasks. She checks the work left over from the previous day and slowly starts processing everything. As she works, she remembers how exhausted she had been before collapsing with a fever. The memory makes her realize just how close she came to overworking herself again. Meanwhile, Yuji watches over the apartment. He remembers Mio struggling with the ingredients earlier and cannot help thinking about her condition. At one point, Mio tries speaking to Fuchan and A-chan, her stuffed animal companions. Of course, no answer comes back. The silence leaves her feeling strangely lonely. Back at the apartment, the kitchen remains cluttered. Slippers are scattered around. Empty natto containers sit on the counter. Various unfinished items are left where they were abandoned. The whole room feels disorganized. Watching all of this, Yuji is reminded of a child who tried to clean up but somehow made a bigger mess instead. He stands there for a moment, unsure how to restore order. Mio continues trying to handle everything herself, but the situation only becomes more confusing. After thinking carefully, Yuji decides that the best solution is to ask for help. He calls Tsuchiya. Tsuchiya answers from his office and listens patiently. Yuji apologizes for bothering him during work hours, before explaining that he needs advice. Specifically, he asks about abacuses. The question catches Tsuchiya off guard. Thinking back to his student days, Tsuchiya recalls learning the basics. Then Yuji presents an unusual problem. If someone mistakes natto for an abacus while trying to save their company, he asks, how would you handle it? For a moment, Tsuchiya has no idea how to respond. Even so, the two somehow manage to work through the situation. One of Tsuchiya's earlier suggestions proves useful. Giving Mio an ice cube helps cool her down and brings her back to her usual state of mind. Working together, they gradually solve the problem. Because her fever has not completely disappeared, Mio decides to take a day off from work. Driving or pushing herself in her condition would be irresponsible. Resting at home is the better choice. In the end, Yuji concludes that everything has been handled properly. The crisis has finally passed. Several peaceful days go by. Then one afternoon, the doorbell rings. The sound echoes through the apartment. A new development is about to begin.
Please!
Subscribe.
I need this! My mom is kind of homeless.